Afraid, afraid, I guess, of failing, maybe?
I regret all the time I wasted, not saying yes to things.
It's something I've always wanted to do since I was little.
Time slipping away, I mean, that's probably the worst feeling in the world, right?
Loads of friends from different walks of life, and it's really hard to keep in touch with everyone.
Up until recently, I was homeless. If I hadn't hurt the people that I had, maybe I wouldn't have been.
I wanted to do so many things, but I could never seem to find the time.
I did all the things that were like plan B. I just never did it. Feels like where I want to be. Feels like where I want to go.
That it's not my regret anymore.
It's hopeful. It means there's possibility.
Kind of interesting, isn't it? Regrets. Regrets, you don't want to get them. You don't like to have them. But you can learn from them and learn not to multiply them. Every day is a new day with God. Well, every one of us that have lived any length of time, I don't care how old you are, can look at moments in your life already, from 6 years old to 60 years old, and look back. Maybe it's not like a earth-shattering, life and death kind of regret, but you can look back and think to yourself, I wish I hadn't done that. I look back at some of my early years, some of the stupid things I did do. Wasn't that long ago. And I think to myself, I wish I hadn't done that. I wish I hadn't said that. I wish I didn't treat that person that way. I wish I didn't not look at so-and-so at that moment. Whatever the regrets are. Always regrets. The beautiful thing with God is that God, every time we seek to reach out to Him, we talked about this Wednesday night, every time I draw to Him, He'll draw to me. Every day is new. Every day is an opportunity for me to leave behind what was wrong and to start fresh. That's what the book of Nehemiah is about. You look at the book of Nehemiah, we talk about it's about, rebuilding the walls. It's all about Israel. It's all about prophecy being fulfilled. It's all, yes. But you know what it's really all about is a God who looks at a nation that He chose, that He blessed, that He cared for and provided for over and over and over and over and over again. And every time they turn their back on Him, turn their back on Him, turn their back on Him, and every time they turn back to Him, He comes back to them. Every single time. And that's what the book of Nehemiah is. Nehemiah chapter 2 is where we're going to find ourselves as we work through here. Let me give you the setting a little bit. About the middle of the 5th century BC, a Jew named Nehemiah, who was a servant to the king, he was the cupbearer for the king of Persia, which means that even the other servants who would taste the wine or whatever they brought the king to drink, before he drank it, the cupbearer, who is his most trusted servant, would again take a drink. Because what would happen to him if somebody was trying to kill the king? He would die. So every single time he sipped a cup, he was surrendering his life to the king. That, by the way, is an incredible illustration. Every time he fulfilled his call of the king, he was surrendering his life for the king's sake. That's the call of the Christian, by the way. But that's not even today's lesson. All right. So he's a cupbearer. He was a servant of the king of Persia. The Persian Empire heard distressing news about the ruins in his ancestral homeland. At this point, Ezra had rebuilt the temple. But the temple laid open to all the other nations coming in and attacking it and robbing it and hurting the people and taking the people and murdering the people. The walls of Jerusalem were still in wreckage. He spent many days mourning and praying when he heard the news in chapter 1. Praying and fasting, seeking God's guidance for how he should respond to the rundown condition of the city's walls and gates. After that time, he stepped out in faith as prayer led to plans, and then plans led to action. Here's the thing. We find ourselves in a place where we're looking at regrets we have in life. We can't change what we did do. We talk about this throughout the decades that we've been doing counseling with individuals and couples as well. Look, you can't change yesterday. All you can do is fix today, is direct today. And that's what Nehemiah was all about. Nehemiah chapter 2, verses 1 through 5. Nehemiah 2, verses 1 through 5. It came to pass in the month of Nisan. The month of Nisan, March and April. That's significant for two reasons. I want you to know this. Number one, that's the time coming up on the celebration of Passover for Israel. That was also considered a new year, time of year for the Persian Empire. So you have two major feasts or celebrations that involve Nehemiah and the king of Persia. The New Year, which is always a big celebration. I don't care what country you're from. Everybody celebrates the New Year. And certainly Persia did that. It had certain ways of doing that. And we're going to see evidence of that in a little bit with a parenthetical statement here that everybody seems to scratch their head about why is it there. Why did Nehemiah put it there? I'll at least speculate with you. But then secondly, Passover. So Nehemiah is looking at the Passover coming. As the servant of the king of Persia, he's also looking at the celebration of the New Year coming. This is the time when things that are out of the norm are happening. Lots of people in the background making plans, pulling things together. This was also, to intensify things, an optimal time for people to attack the king, poison the king, because there's a lot more activity, unique setups going on, things happening, just like we do today. All of those things are going on. It came to pass in the month of Nisan, in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, about 444 BC, and we can peg that date based on secular sources of King Artaxerxes. There in the records of Persia and Persia's rule. Now, in 20th year, King Artaxerxes, when wine was before him, that I took the wine and gave it to the king as the cupbearer. Now, I had never been sad in his presence before. That's significant for a couple of reasons. Number one, he's letting us know a little bit about the weight that he carries and his responsibility. Can you imagine being before the king? You know that with every sip, you are putting your life at risk for the king. If anybody is going to get to the king and poison the king, you're going to die. Period. All right? Now imagine that you're the servant of the king. You have never had a heavy countenance in his presence before. Wow. I mean, when I face death, I haven't yet, but when I face death, I'm probably not going to be like super cheerful, especially when it's this kind of facing death. So here he is. He's never been sad in the presence of the king before. Secondly, for this reason. The king, court jesters and all that kind of stuff, kings, especially powerful kings back then, didn't like to surround themselves with pouty faces. That's not a biblical term. That's, just my term. All right? He didn't want people around being sad. He wanted them to be happy and upbeat. That's why, even in the story of Esther, we have the king there. We have Esther with the king. We have Naaman coming in and all of these parties that Esther is throwing. That was a thing that the kings liked. They liked to be joyful and happy and all of those things. On top of the fact that they're coming up this time of year to the celebrations that are going on. Having the wrong countenance could also make the king suspicious of the cupbearer. Imagine a guy who is there and makes the king, he's always happy, he's always, easygoing and everything else. Oh, this is good. Here, king, drink of this. And all of a sudden he gets this kind of sad face and worried face and he hands it to the king. Maybe trembling a little bit. What do you think the king's going to think? He's poisoning me, right? Okay, so, all those things going on, it's significant when we look at this. He has never been sad. He's never had a sorrowful heart in the presence of the king before. Therefore, the king said to me, why is your face sad? You're not sick. This is nothing but sorrow of heart. So I became dreadfully afraid. That's why he's afraid. Is the king going to be suspicious of me? Is he going to be upset with me for not making him happy? This king had authority over his life. So now he's taking his life in his hands by sipping the wine in the first place. Secondly, he's coming with a heavy countenance. Now, this was planned. This has been 4 months after chapter 1. 4 full months of Nehemiah thinking about Israel, thinking about the temple, thinking about his homeland, thinking about the ruins of the walls of Jerusalem, that the temple has no protection, people are getting hurt and stolen and killed, all of those things. So he's dreadfully afraid at this point. He says to the king, may the king live forever. Why should my face not be sad? When the city, the place of my father's tombs, lies waste, and its gates are burned with fire. Now, why were the gates of Israel burned with fire? Who destroyed all of that? Rome? Well, Rome later, much later. So first you have the Assyrians that came in. They laid siege of it. They destroyed it, built it up a little bit. The Babylonians came in, did a better job of that, leveled it some more. Persians came in. They finished the job. There was nothing left. All right? Until Ezra went back and rebuilt then the temple itself. All right? Israel, the Jews, the Israelites were known to be problem makers. Troublemakers, that was a better term. All right? They're troublemakers even for Persia. Persia wouldn't have even cared about Israel because at this point they're not even a power, except for the fact that some of the rebellion from the Israelites was annoying to them. So just to quiet them down, they went in and finished the job the Babylonians didn't do. So all of that is happening. Now, imagine Nehemiah standing before the king of Persia who doesn't like rebellions. Imagine that as a king. He doesn't like rebellions against his nation, asking the king now to build up. So he doesn't mention where. He just says the place of my homeland, of my ancestors. He's kind of easing things into this. Now we know God's hand is in this because of King Xerxes, or Artaxerxes. Xerxes was Esther. King Artaxerxes, his answer is anything but miraculous. That he actually let Nehemiah do this, knowing what the history of the nation of Israel was. Right? So I said to the king, may the king live forever. Why should my face not be sad when the city, the place of my father's tombs, lies waste? Its gates are burned with fire. Then the king said to me, what do you request? So I prayed to the God of heaven. And then I said to the king. Now we know in chapter 1 he prayed, right? The first response he had when he heard the news about the nation of Israel was, oh. He just sat down. I had to tell you, I got a phone call when I was in Ohio as a youth pastor. Phone call from somebody I knew, and I asked them a question about someone else I knew that I heard was going through a hard time. And I heard that they were not in ministry, and then they told me somebody else was not in ministry, and then they told me somebody else I knew was dead. Like all in one, like 2-minute segment on the phone. We had a corded phone back then. For those of you who don't know what that is, it's a phone that hangs on the wall that has a cord that goes to it that stays on the wall. You can't take it off the wall, and the handset has a cord that goes to it. It was long enough. I literally sat on the floor in the kitchen. I just sat down, overwhelmed with the news, and that's what was going on with Nehemiah. He was so overwhelmed. He sat down, and his first response in chapter 1 is pray. He just went to the Lord, and he fasted, and he prayed, and he sought God in it all. Then he made plans. It's obvious he made plans because of what's coming up and what he asked of the king. But the very next thing is, okay, I'm here. I'm next to the king. Here's the wine. I taste the wine. Okay, I lived. I'm okay. I give it to the king. And then I realize that my face is a little bit sad because I know now what my plan is. And I'm trying to think through, how am I going to say this to the king? Although he probably has thought through it a little bit. I don't think he necessarily planned the countenance. You can't plan enough to know the king will ask you, but the king did. Now he's sore afraid. He's very afraid because now he's going to lose his life again. All of those things are happening, and now he thinks, okay, the king didn't kill me. I'm still alive, and the king is actually talking with me now a little bit. So the very first thing he says before he answers the king is he says a little prayer again in his mind and heart to God. One of the things that we do the least often is just go to God in moments throughout the day. Just little moments. He's in the middle of a conversation. How many times, and I'd be ashamed to answer this question, so don't answer it for me. How many times in the middle of a conversation do you say a prayer to God before you say the next thing? Talk about a way to curb your answer to someone, to seek God's wisdom as you talk with someone. Here's Nehemiah in the midst of all this with all these things on his mind, and he's still standing here alive beside the king, not in addition to the king. He's standing there, he's alive, he looks at the king, he's still living, and he says a quick prayer under his breath again, seeking God. And then he says, verse 5. And by the way, end of verse 4, the God of heaven. How many of you follow the blog for church, the church's blog? All right, 1 or 2 of you, okay? There are 3 heavens in the Bible. Do you know the difference between the 3? Remember the Apostle Paul said, I was caught up, or he kind of leaves it in the third person. He was caught up into the 3rd heaven. You know what 3 heavens are? I'm not telling you. Go to the church's blog. All right? 3 heavens. Talks about it right there. Okay, all you have to do is, the website for the church, wbchurch.org. All right, to go to the church's blog, you can go to wbchurch.org. At the very bottom has the word blog. Click there. That easy. If you really want to get technical, you can type wbchurch.wordpress.com. Enter. You go there. Okay? Go there and read about it. 3 heavens. All right, that's there. All right, so then the king said to me, what do you request? Verse 4, so I prayed to the God of what? Heaven. What do you think that heaven's talking about, by the way?
The place where God exists.
Probably the 3rd heaven that Paul was talking about. All right, where God is. Absolutely. All right, so verse 5, and I said to the king, if it pleases the king, if your servant has found favor in your sight, boy, how much can he qualify it, right? I ask that you send me to Judah, to the city of my father's tombs, that I may rebuild it. He was discreet. He was careful, but he planned. We don't have time to actually do the whole lesson. This is really my first page. Okay? But let me say this to you. No matter what, Nehemiah, no matter what Israel's regrets were, and it was a laundry list at this point, right? I mean, at this point, name me some of the regrets Israel had. Baal worship, the worship of other gods besides the God in heaven, the God of creation. Intermarriage with other nations when God commanded them not to do that. That's not by way of statement of not getting, of intermarrying with other nationalities today. It's not that. Okay, just something completely different. What else, Sam?
Ingratitude, when they got the manna, they were like, oh, we want Kentucky Fried Chicken now. We don't want just...
Yeah, ingratitude. We saw that over and over again. Okay, give me more. There's lots. Stealing, robbing, cheating. Yep. Murdering.
False weights.
Yeah, false weights, cheating. Sacrificing their own children to false gods. They were making their live living, boy, talk about having dysfunctional parents. Their live living children, literally under their own power, walk into flames to death. The nation of Israel, we have whitewashed it in our minds. All right? Their history is awful by this point. I don't think any of us rise to the level of regrets that the nation of Israel had at this point. Think about this. Now, because of Ezra, 2 godly men who seek God continually, whose hearts are broken for the consequence of their regrets, their regretful actions. Seeks God for a period of 4 months. Plans. We don't have time to get into all the plan. He planned this out. Right down to even getting permission for a letter for Asaph. Asaph is a Jewish name of somebody who was in charge of the king's forests so he could get wood for the gates. You ever think about that? That's a Jewish man in charge of a Persian king's forest. Was it Lebanon? Was it in Israel? We don't know. But we know this. He had a letter. He had thought that out too because he asked the king for it before he even left. Why did he need so much wood? When you have a wall that's thick for any nation, typically the gates, one gate on the outside, one gate on the inside. Not just a single gate in the middle. All right, so you've got dual gates. It makes it harder for them to get in. The style that Israel had was 4 gates. Outside, inside, 2 more inside, in the middle. 4 chambers, 3 chambers. 4 sets of gates to get through. And you're talking all the gates around the whole city. They need a lot of wood. Okay, so he obviously planned. When we find ourselves at a place where we are in the middle of regrets, whatever they are, little ones, big ones. And I want you kids to listen to this too. Because you'll have things you wish you hadn't done. Even if it's something that you just get a little punishment for or whatever. But listen to this. Always, 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 even if you know you've wronged God, turn back to God. He'll always come back to you. He did to Nehemiah. And then when you're in the middle of doing what is right or trying to do what is right, constantly seek God through it. Just, God, help me in this, and then say what you're saying. Think it in your head. Just in quiet prayer. You don't have to tell the person you're with, hey, I'm going to stop for a moment of prayer now. Just talk to God. God, help me to say the right thing. Help me to think through this. All right? Make sure you do that. And lastly, plan. Step back and plan how you can avoid adding more regrets. What steps do I have to take so I don't do this again? How do I fix it? How do I fix the consequences I'm experiencing? What can I do so that I don't continue to mount up those regrets? Remember the video in the beginning? They gave them the eraser and they got that clean board up there. And the one lady goes, that's my goal. A clean slate. You can't erase what's past, but you can have a clean slate moving forward. Every day is new and an opportunity to do things God's way. It's hard. But we're going to see in 1 Peter how God is faithful. He just asks us to reach out to him and to put our trust in him. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you, Lord, for Nehemiah and his example of how to move past regrets. Lord, I know we can't erase the consequences of them, but we certainly can start a new slate for the day. And moving forward, keep that slate clean. Lord, help us to seek you in the midst of the unknown, when the consequences of our regrets mount, when we find ourselves sitting down in despair. Help us to reach out to you, Lord, and sense your reaching out to us. Help us to learn, Lord, to do what is right, according to your plan, doing it your way, for your glory, so that we might see your great provision in the midst of it, and see you change the hearts and minds of those that are battling evil around us. Lord, you changed the heart and mind of Artaxerxes. You softened it to Israel's cause, and you gave Israel a blessing they didn't deserve, didn't earn, shouldn't have had. And yet you gave it to them through King Artaxerxes. Lord, help us to do the same and see the same in our lives as well. Thank you for Nehemiah and his trust in you. In Jesus' name, amen.